Hey everybody, how you doing tonight on Facebook? You may be watching this broadcast on any number of channels tonight. We have a lot of participation and different churches, organizations, ministries that are allowing this to be multicast out tonight. So we just thank you for that. We're super excited to have Kris Vallotton with us tonight, and also to have some pastors and leaders of two great churches here in Alaska. Dennis Hotchkiss from Northgate Alaska Church with his son Tanner, and Mark and Lanny are great friends of mine who lead a church in Homer called Regent Life, and Sean and Jenny are part of the leadership team there. So welcome everybody.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Great to be here.
Yep. So for those of you that are tuning in tonight, you might wonder why we're doing this at 7:14. And we started doing these, after this COVID thing hit, and we just decided, what, Second Chronicles 7:14 is a good place to start when there's a plague in the land. And I've had people say, well, that's an Old Testament verse for a specific people at a specific time. But I just want to say that, that passage of scripture and that verse illustrates that there's a relationship that God's people have with God that he is willing to allow us into, where if we respond to him in the way that he wants us to respond to him, that he promises to come and heal our land. And my contention is, if it could happen in the Old Testament under an inferior covenant, how much more can it happen with those of us who are born again, purchased by the blood of the Lamb, who are new believer, a new creation, seated together with Christ in heavenly places, allowed to come into the throne room boldly. If people in the old covenant could petition God and have him heal their land and abate a plague that was in the land, how much more should we? And the ecclesia, I contend, is the most powerful force on the earth. If we just knew it, and if we would work together and participate with God, there's nothing that could stop that. So anyway, enough with that. There's four main goals for the meeting tonight. I'm just giving some time here for people to pop on. I see people added to the feed. This platform exists really to bring leaders together who love Alaska and who desire to see the kingdom advanced. And we want to provide a way for the leaders of the body of Christ to speak to leaders and believers of the region. And Kris Vallotton is one of those leaders who lots and lots of people in Alaska respect, myself included, and all the people you see on the screen tonight. And he's had a massive impact in my life. And so we're super excited that he can have a chance to share with Alaska tonight. And number three, we wanted to bring a word from the Lord about how we could respond rightly to the Lord in this hour of crisis. Like, as believers, as leaders, as church leaders, and people that believe in God and have a relationship with God, how do we act? How do we behave in this moment? What are some things that we can think about? And I believe that Kris brings a word of clarity for us in that regard. And fourthly, the last thing I really wanted to see happen for this broadcast tonight is to bring together a few leaders from Alaska that lead churches that are actually stewarding what Bethel and what Bill and what Kris and the whole movement have brought over the years. That stewardship is a big deal, that we don't just have somebody speak and then go, wow, that was great, but we actually embrace what we're being taught and we try to apply it to our life and actually live it out in a way that advances the kingdom. And I know that Dennis and Northgate and Lanny and Mark with Regent Life, I know you are two churches in Alaska that are super connected relationally with Bethel, with Kris, with Bill and the leadership team there, and that you are actually leading organizations, leading churches that are attempting to really advance the kingdom. So it's an honor to have all of you together. And so once again, with us tonight, Kris Vallotton from Bethel Church in Redding is with us. Pastor Dennis Hotchkiss, his son Tanner from Northgate Alaska Church, and Mark and Lanny, Mark Edens, Lanny Simpson, and Sean and Jenny Grimes from Regent Life Church in Homer. And before we get started, we're going to kick it off here in just a minute. We're going to get right into it. We're going to let Kris pretty much have the floor and share with us what he wants to share with us. Before we begin, we want to give a shout out to some of the leaders and churches that actually opened up their Facebook pages and allowed a multicast to go out, a syndication to go out tonight on their Facebook page. So, Dennis, you want to kick that off?
Sure. We shout out to Go Pegrin, one of our own here in the Valley, Carry the Cure Ministry. Glad you're on here with this guy. Also, Shane Hopkins out of Fairbanks with the Lighthouse Church. So thankful you're on with us, as well as Peter Newberger with Kashaba Tribe Ministries, ministers to Eastern Africa, and just welcome that guy and that group of people as well.
Beautiful.
All right, I'd like to give a shout out to the Alaska and British Columbia Church of God Superintendent Pat Wright. He's a statewide influence, excuse me, and welcome. And also the UP Assembly of God Pastor J.R. Markle up in Barrow, and blessings and welcome to you.
Yeah. And then also Jake Amberson Ministries, he's in Wasilla, and shout out to you, Jake. And Soul Harvest Ministries, Pastor Paul and Vicki Steinkamp, and they're in Ketchikan. And then Hilltop Assembly of God, Pastor Kent Mitchell in Houston, Alaska. Shout out to you guys.
We'd also like to shout out to Stephanie Claiborne, who has actually got 2 pages out tonight, the one for her book, and also the BSSM Alaska alumni page is streaming this tonight too, Kris. So that's kind of cool. There are lots and lots of people in Alaska that went through Bethel Supernatural School of Ministry. And so, Kris, you know, I think probably most of the people that are on this stream tonight know of you or heard of you, but there may be people that don't. But I just want to say that, you know, Kris Vallotton is an Ephesians 4 gift to the body of Christ. And globally, it started in Reading, but the scope has grown, and the way the Lord has used what He's doing there in Reading is just amazing, and we know that, and it's just a real honor that you would take the time to talk to Alaska, to a region. And you know, Kris actually has a history of coming to Alaska. I don't know if it was 2 trips or 3 trips that you came up here years ago. But you came up and ministered, had some really great times way back when we first met. You know, Bill came up, I think, first, and then I think you came up with Bill one time and maybe one time on your own. I can't remember exactly, but I have memories of, you know, Kris sitting on the living room floor and in a small little living room with 10 or 12 leaders in a circle, and just literally pouring into our leadership team and just pouring into our lives. And so for a long time, your voice has been a voice in this land, in this region, and we just want to honor you for that. And the School of Ministry, as I mentioned, lots and lots and lots of people that are in Alaska have been trained up at Bethel Supernatural School of Ministry and are doing just some really, really amazing things. And I know that you've been carrying a word from the Lord for this season, Kris, and back in November, I think it was November, you had a word about providence, divine providence, and how there's seasons and moments in time when God just like steps in and says, you know, I'm going to step into time in this moment, and I've got a plan for this period of time, and how providence just kind of like shakes us up. I think that was such a timely word. Nobody knew exactly what that word meant, but I think we're beginning to see a little bit about that. And then lately, you've been bringing a word about divine reset. Humility is the way forward. And those podcasts and those articles you've been writing have been so like ministering to my heart, helping to bring clarity to my own heart in the season. So we're just so blessed that you're here. We value your voice, who you are, what you bring. And we just want to turn this over to you and just basically just hear from you for whatever you like to say to those of us in Alaska that are tuned in tonight.
Thank you very much. And I think I've been to Alaska about 7 times.
Oh, 7 times.
I was with J.R. Marco several times, and
in Fairbanks.
Yeah, I've been there when it never gets dark, and I've been there when it never gets light. So that was a very interesting experience. When you go to sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's like bright, just like light, like daytime. So that was a very different experience. But yeah, I'm so thankful for what's happening all over the world, and so love Alaska, and did many trips to Alaska in the early days of coming to Bethel. And Bill and I used to come a lot. We really felt like we were just so into that land, and now I've sowed my son into that land. He has multiple motives for coming there, though. Okay. And I want to say I came with a pure heart. I don't hunt or fish, and I'm not so sure about him. But anyway, really, really wonderful. Yeah, if it's okay, I'd just like to pray for our time. And Lord, I bless every single leader, every single person that's on this call. Lord, I pray that you would just open up our eyes and our ears tonight as we interact, that we would say things and see things, hear things and know things that we've never known before. Lord, I pray that there would be such a profound prophetic sense of destiny and purpose. I pray that we would lift the hopeless, that we would encourage the faint-hearted, that we'd give peace to the anxious, and that we'd give vision to those who are feeling a sense of purposelessness or wandering aimlessly. Lord, I pray that these things, these dimensions would happen as we interact. Yeah. Amen. Pat, how long do we have? I think you told me, but I didn't remember.
Yeah, we usually run, an hour to an hour 30. So really, okay. It's just up to however long you want to share. And
that's great.
Yep.
And you guys that are right here, you can interrupt with some questions. That would be wonderful if you have them. So I'll start from a little bit from the beginning of this, what I call Epoch season. Epoch, EPOCH, meaning a way in which God deals with a certain people in a certain time. And I guess it's probably pretty obvious right now that the Epoch season has shifted, that the Kairos moments have shifted. And, the Greeks, they have two ways of measuring time. Chronos, one's called chronos, which we get our word chronology, a clock and a calendar. And then there's another word called kairos, and kairos actually measures impact rather than times, rather than measurements of time. We actually have one word that we use for everything, but we actually, like, for instance, if I said to you, I had a great time, you wouldn't look at your watch or think, well, what time was that? You would understand that I'm using the word time to mean there was an episode in which I experienced a certain thing. So kairos doesn't necessarily mean, the word kairos isn't spiritual. It just denotes that there's an episode, that there is a situation, that there is something besides the normal clock and calendar. And the way I like to put it is that, for instance, the sons of Issachar understood the times, and they knew what Israel should do in the times. Now, unfortunately, that word times, if you look it up, and I've had a couple people do this, and like, that word's not chronos. No, chronos is actually a Greek word, and unfortunately, the Hebrews only have one word for time, like we do. But the articulation there, the sons of Issachar understood the times, and they knew what Israel should do in the times. And I'd like to propose that we've gone from chronos times to kairos times, in this way, in that God has sovereignly, taken hold of the earth, and there are seasons on the earth when free will reigns. We all know we have free will. Like, God would love everyone to go to heaven, but it's not people who want to go to heaven that get there. It's only people who will to go to heaven, right? We know that you can that God honors free will. That He put two trees in the garden, and He said, "Eat this tree, don't eat this tree." He wanted us to all eat the tree of life, but He gave us a choice. And so this is how powerful free will is. But if we look throughout history, there are times when God takes over free will. I don't know if that's the right way to express it, but where God interrupts free will, let's put it that way. And we see it all throughout history. For instance, a great example is the Tower of Babel. And their people are building a tower to heaven. And it's funny how the Genesis story goes, because God goes, let's go down there and check out the tower and see if what we heard is really true. So God goes down and sees that they're building a tower, and God says to evidently to the angels or to the Trinity, he said, well, you know what? If we let them continue this tower, then nothing will be impossible to them. And God, as you know, he interrupts the tower building by changing their language, and thus it's the Tower of Babel, and they can't understand each other, and the tower stops. It's a great example of God allows free will till he doesn't. And free will happens until God decides to step in and interrupt free will. Noah, the days of Noah is another place where God just goes, okay, wickedness is stopped. I'm done with this. And God causes a flood, and he resets, if you will, he resets mankind. The reason I'm sharing that with you is because I got this prophetic word in around November. And the Lord told me that we are moving into divine providence. In fact, what actually happened is I woke up 5 mornings in a row with the word providence in my mind. And I don't use that word. I actually didn't even actually know what the word meant. I had heard it, never actually heard it used in a sentence. And I looked up the word, and it means the foreseen care and guidance of God over the creatures of the earth. And I'm like, okay, that's beautiful. And then I began to have encounter one after another encounters. And one night I woke up in the middle of the night and in cold sweats, and the Lord said, the iniquity of the Amorites is complete. And I was like, the iniquity of the Amorites? I've heard that phrase somewhere. And I literally had to Google on my Bible program. And I began to, a message began to unfold over the next month or two, which I began to share in December. December 8th, I think, was the first time I actually shared the message. But I want to read you a passage in Genesis chapter 15, verse 12. The Lord is talking to Abram, who becomes Abraham. And he says to them, I'll read it to you. It says, now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And behold, terror and great darkness fell upon him. And God said to Abram, know for certain, for your descendants shall be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they are enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. But I will also judge the nation in whom they serve, and afterward they shall come out with many possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace, and you shall be buried at a good old age. Then in the 4th generation they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete. And that a kind of obscure verse, but the Lord is prophesying to Abraham. We didn't read the whole thing, but he was prophesying about his lineage, and he was telling Abraham, "You're going to be a father to nations. All this amazing stuff's going to happen, and you're going to be a father of many nations." And he gives him this amazing word. And then in verse 12, he begins to talk to him about the fact that although there's going to be an amazing, your overall picture is amazing. You will be a father to many nations. There's going to be 400 years when your people are oppressed. And he talks to him about the Egyptians oppressing the Israelites hundreds of years before it happened. And he said, at the end of 400 years, when the iniquity of the Amorite is complete, I will let them go. Interesting thing happened, of course. So 360 years passes, and Moses is, taken. The Pharaoh's killing all the firstborn, and Moses's parents see that that they don't want their son to die, so they put him in the Nile River. The Pharaoh's daughter rescues him, and thus Moses grows up in Pharaoh's house. And when he's 40 years old, he hasn't had a divine encounter yet, but he has this DNA that he knows that he's supposed to deliver the people. And as you know, he tries to deliver the Israelites from Egypt. The only problem is it's the 360th year. And God said, in the 400th year, I'll let the people go. And so he was the right man. He had the right idea. He had the right heart, but it wasn't the right time. And as we well know, he ends up failing. He's in the wilderness, and we all know that story well, so we won't retell it. But he meets God in the 400th year. And God says to him, I've seen the oppression of my people, and I send you. And God begins to, if you will, God begins to enact sovereignty. And he says to Moses, Pharaoh will let you go. Pharaoh will let you go. Trust me, Pharaoh's going to let you go. And of course, Moses has all these concerns about, he doesn't think that's going to happen because Moses only knows free will. He has yet to encounter a Kairos moment where God says, we're going to do what I want to do now. And Pharaoh has never encountered a Kairos moment when he didn't have free will. And as you know, God does several plagues and Pharaoh lets God's people go. You're like, what point are you making? I'm making a point that I made in December, that God has sovereignly taken over charge of the earth. He has sovereignly taken over charge of the earth. And he is moving, and we are moving at the speed of Kairos conditions. And I think I had this vision many years ago when we were living in a little community. I had a whole bunch of prophetic words about business, and I was in business. And God said, if you go into business, I'll bless you. And he gave me specific things that would happen. And for several years, everything that God said would happen didn't happen. It was all the opposite. As a matter of fact, I felt like Joseph, where God says to Joseph, listen, gives Joseph a dream. You're going to be a ruler. It's going to be amazing. Your brothers are going to bow down to you. Your fathers and mothers are going to bow down to you. And then the very next thing that happens is he's in a pit. And the next scene, he's in slavery. And the next scene, he's in prison. And the circumstances are opposite of everything that Joseph's been prophesied. And I went through a season exactly like that. Of course, I didn't understand the Joseph story in those days. And I began to think that my prophetic words were wrong. And I'm like, you know what? I'm spending all this time sowing into this prophetic word, doing everything that these 10 prophetic people told me I should do. And I'm just going to not do that. I'm going to go my own way. And I'm not going to leave God. This isn't working. I am not being blessed in business. I am not making money. And maybe it seems like a week or two into that, my new attitude of let's find another direction. Let's go with wisdom, and let's go with logic and reason. Let's do that. And I had this really powerful vision. And in the vision, God was walking down this path, and there was people that were standing in the way, and they were like football players, and they were in defensive stances, and they were resisting the direction of God. They were standing in the path, resisting him. As he encountered them, he would just grab them and then throw them like rag dolls. He was just throwing them. And in the vision, he threw several of them, and in the vision, I was next. And I could still remember the feeling of God, of seeing God and meeting his eyes. And I got down in a defensive stance as the others had done. And he looks at me and he says to me, get out of my way. Get out of my way. And I'm like, weird dreams are, visions are. And I hesitated. I'm like, should I or shouldn't I? And he reached over to grab my arm as he had done with the others. And I immediately got out of the way, just got out of the path. And without turning back, he passed me. And without turning back, he said, now just follow. Now just follow. I have to say, that the uncertainty of the times lifted with the certainty of who I was following. Suddenly, what was going to happen in the future was not my primary focus. My primary focus was just being confident in who I'm with, not where I'm going. And I remember thinking, I don't know where I'm going. It did not clarify one thing in where I was going, but it made me really understand who I'm with. And I began to find a lot of peace in the fact that I am with God. I don't know where I'm going, and I have to really be honest. I wish I could say, and we lived happily ever after. We did not. We did another 2 or 3 years of what I would say, now looking back, is completely different, but in the midst of it, I would say was an unblessed life. Trials, troubles, no money, struggling. But honestly, it was a completely different experience because God gave my pain, my suffering, he gave it a purpose. Suddenly, my suffering had a purpose. I knew I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, and my job was to stay close. I believe a lot in thinking. I just wrote a book on spiritual intelligence. But there are times to just obey. There are times to not ask questions. You know, Proverbs says God's a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. In fact, he says the word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. I actually think that's 2 different seasons. There are times when God's a light to our feet. In other words, I don't know where I'm going. I just know what the next step is. And I think in those seasons, the goal is just to learn to have confidence in who you're with. And then it says, and he's the light to our path. I personally, well, I'm a prophet, so it's my job to kind of have an idea where we're going. But it's God's job to make sure that I'm not trusting in my circumstances. I'm trusting in his presence. And I think that there are times when God covers our eyes and I'm like, God, where am I going? What's happening next? And God says, if you feel uncertain, it's because you put your trust in things that are not that are infinite, that are finite and not infinite. And so I believe that we're in a profound season where God has taken the reins of the world and that he has several goals. And one of those goals, I believe that we're in a divine reset. And when God said the iniquity of the Amorites is complete, I believe that God is resetting the moral values of the world. That we are, I don't know about you, but I'm not a techie guy. I should be because I was in the automotive field. I was one of the top techs in America for a few years. But my computer used to mess up all the time, my phone. And the tech guys, we have a tech department, and they would say, Kris, have you turn it off and then turn it back on? Turn it off. And, that happened enough times that, in fact, one of the tech guys goes, Kris, do me a favor. Before you ever call us on anything, turn your device off and turn it back on. And I learned that when you shut it off and you bring it back up, it often defrags. And I feel like the Lord has us on a divine reset, that we've been sent to our rooms to think about our attitudes as nations. And that there is a conviction on the world right now. People are talking about how many people are dying from the virus, coronavirus. And I don't have facts right this minute, but I'll bet you there's a ton more people living than dying because we've been quarantined to our homes. I bet the abortion rate is 1/10 of what it usually is. I bet in America, I bet the people who die in accidents is half. I bet if you looked at the whole picture, that actually there's a ton more people living than dying probably in a long time. In fact, Texas didn't have one. They went a complete 24 hours without one abortion. That hasn't happened since 1973. So, I think we're on a timeout. I think people are getting the opportunity to really think about the value of life, the value of morality. And I want to say that God cares about the world. He loves the world, but the world is the world. God, when the world sins, they're acting out their nature. And lots of times we as Christians go, gosh, the world is, embracing whatever they're embracing, homosexuality, transgenderism, abortion, and it's the world. It's the world. Like, they're supposed to act like that. That's the difference between the world and believers. But when believers normalize sin, that's a completely different thing. And Pat, this is profound that you guys are starting on 7:14, Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sins and heal their land. It's not predicated on what Bill Gates does or what any non-believer does. God says, if you guys who know me will do these things, then I will heal your land. And so sometimes we feel powerless. We're like, what's the president going to do? What's our governor going to do? And God's like, listen, what are you going to do? Because we are the people that have the authority. We're the people that have the ball. So I think that we're in a very, very crucial time in history. And I think 100 years from now, they will look back and they will call this the beginning of the Second Reformation, the catalyst for the Renaissance. And I do think that we're in a really powerful and beautiful season. And Isaiah 42:9 says, the former things have come to pass. Behold, I proclaim new things to you. Sing to the Lord a new song. And I've shared this many times, but it's much more profound right now, that God says, the former things have come to pass. Behold, there's a new thing. I want you to start by singing a new song. And I really believe that new song is a new way of thinking. God's like, there's a new season. It's going to require a new way of thinking. I love this quote. I've quoted it so many times. Eric Hoffer said, in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully prepared, but for a world that no longer exists. In times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully prepared, but for a world that no longer exists. And I really think that's such a powerful statement. I read it many years ago, and it's one of the most profound quotes that I've ever read. I want to just, I'm changing modes for just a minute. I want to talk a little bit about like going forward, moving forward. How do we move forward? And I want to first of all say that it's going to require a new song, a new way of thinking. And I'm talking about from everything from technology to what we call church, the way we do church. We ended up not being able to meet, and hundreds of millions of more people are touched. Like a church of 200 has now become a church of 400. A church of 10,000 has now become a church of 100,000. And it's like all of a sudden, it's like persecution came to Jerusalem, and all the apostles, like God said, okay, I want you to go to Judea, to Jerusalem, and to the rest of the world. And they're like, oh, let's stay here. This is so comfortable. And God goes, okay, well, I got a ways and means committee to send you out on an apostolic mission. It's called persecution. And I'm not talking about persecution. I'm just talking about that God knows how to shake us and say, I told you to influence the entire world. And we become without trying, we become the church without walls. And suddenly, what we said, can't ever happen has happened overnight. Can a nation be saved in a day? And suddenly, we are all on this amazing technology, and we are preaching the gospel to hundreds of millions of people every day. And I really feel like we're on when we return to normal, our normal will never be normal again, because we tasted something. We forcefully tasted something we didn't ask for, but we very much needed. And sometimes you don't eat what you want to eat. I mean, you don't eat what you need to eat, you eat what you want to eat. And God goes, I think this is what you need. And so there's just a huge explosion in evangelism and in the word going out to so many people. And it's very exciting. And I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about a great example. Many of you are old enough to remember Montgomery Ward's and Sears stores. And when I was a young man, in fact, up till just maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but when I was, Sears and Montgomery Ward's, they were the Apple computer of the decades. And their retail distribution and marketing was absolutely brilliant. Instead of being relegated to one store, they began a catalog, and they put all their products in catalogs that literally ended up being 2 feet thick. They developed distribution centers throughout the United States, strategic distribution centers, and what they did in rural areas, they put little catalog stores in, so you could just drive in. Like we were in Weaverville, we had a Sears catalog store and a Ward's catalog store when we first moved there, and you could just go into the catalog store, look through the catalog, figure out what you wanted to buy, and order it, and it was there. And usually 2 to 3 days, you'd have your product. It was brilliant. Looking back, obviously, it doesn't seem so brilliant when you live in the 21st century. But you got to think that this started I think they started in the 40s or something, and both Sears and Ward's were both Christians, and so it was brilliant, and they were on the cutting edge of retail sales. They had distribution all over the United States. They had negotiated contracts with every single supplier. They had everything. Every single product that they sold was in picture form with description. And then the internet showed up, right? Let's call it really significantly 20 years ago, 25 years ago. The internet shows up, and they should have been on the cutting edge of retail in the internet. I mean, they had everything. All they had to do is digitize their pictures. They had all their descriptions. They had all the contracts with every single supplier all over the world. They had distribution everywhere. And they had brick and mortar stores in every major city. What happened? Amazon and eBay stormed the market. Literally, they're 70 years behind, and within 5 years, they take the market. In 10 years, they bankrupt Sears and Ward's. I mean, you may say, where are you going? I'm saying 2 companies that began with a pioneering spirit, with innovation and invention. They were, if you will, the Walt Disney of retail. They were always thinking about new ways to do it, faster ways to get you stuff, new products, tools that everybody wanted, craftsman tools. Sears appliances were the best appliances in the world, so on and so forth. But in a very short time, the pioneers became the settlers. And literally, Amazon, who should have never, and I understand I'm not making godly statements here, I'm talking about the dog-eat-dog world of business. Amazon should have never had a foot in the door. I mean, Sears could have, in 2 years, They could have uploaded all their products, and Amazon and eBay would have been in the dust without contracts, with very little business, with no distribution centers, and Sears and Montgomery Wards would have crushed them. But they didn't do it. You know why? Because they were complacent. Because what started them didn't keep them going. And I feel like the church has been so complacent in the last 30 years. Technology has caused pornography, immorality to just plummet the internet, and on every distribution network is immoral platforms. Literally, television is taken over with the gay movement. Every gay agenda is on nearly every show. And Christians curse the darkness instead of bringing the light. Mm. And suddenly God goes, okay, I'm going to send you home and see what you create. And I actually believe that, although, did God cause the virus? I don't know. But God uses stuff that he doesn't cause. And God has enough foresight to see what the enemy's doing and goes, watch what I'll do with this.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is the most, adversity is the mother of invention. Like, I feel like this is the most powerful time in history when the church is waking up from its settling spirit and saying, what got us here is not what's keeping us here. And I feel like there's a whole thing about God moving powerfully. On the 3rd, March 17th of this year, I had a dream. And in a dream, the Lord said, you have come to peace, but have you come to faith? You've come to peace. Oh, I'm at peace. Nothing's going to hurt me. And the Lord's like, you've come to peace, but have you come to faith? You've come to rest, but I'm not trying to, I know we should be peaceful. I get that. Follow my analogy. You're resting in the boat, but I've told you that we're going to the other side. I've called you to stop the storm, and you're sleeping in the boat. You've come to peace, but have you come to faith? And then the other day, I woke up in the middle of the night. Actually, it wasn't spiritual, natural causes. And I had this word in my mind. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I had this word in my mind. What if the future is not predetermined? What if the future is determined by our faith? In other words, what if God said, what if we said to God, God, what's the future hold? And God says, what are you believing for? And then a few hours later, I went to sleep and I woke up with a dream, and the Lord said to me, the shift is come. You're moving from defense to offense. It's time to shift from defense to offense. I love basketball and football. And obviously, you don't play basketball on the pro level if you can't play both defense and offense. Defense isn't wrong. It's part of the game. But when you have the ball, you can't play defense. You have to play offense. And I feel like in the last week, it's like the Lord's thrown us the ball. He's like, all right, let's play offense. You've come to peace, but have you come to faith? You have survived the storm, but I don't want you to survive the storm. I want you to thrive in the storm. I said, arise and shine, for your light has come. The glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Behold, deep darkness will cover the earth. Deep darkness is people, but the Lord will rise upon you. His glory will be seen upon you. Nations will come to your light, kings to the brightness of your rising. Did you notice that none of that happened until we arose? It says, you arise and shine, then the glory of the Lord will rise upon you. Like, we are not victims, we are victors. Like, we were created for this day. In the fourth day of the virus, when it was really intense and really, uncertain. And the first 4 days, we were like, what are we going to do with 800 employees? And, we have a $63 million budget. Like, what happens if, all of that stuff was in my mind, practical things. And the fourth day, I woke up and the Lord said to me, you were born for this. You understand? You were actually born for this. And I'm like, I am more than a conqueror. I was created to conquer. And when something's in my way, I'm created to conquer it. And I was reading Numbers 13 this week and sharing within third year school ministry sometime this week. And I was thinking about how Moses sent 12 spies into the land. It's in Numbers 13, 14, and 15. And he sends them into the land and he tells them, I want you to go into the land and I want you to spy out the land, tell us about the land, bring back some fruit, and tell us where we should go up. So they weren't spying out the land to figure out if they should go into the land. That question was already answered. The question is, where should we go up and what's the best strategy? And so you all know the story. They come back, 12 of them come back, and 10 of them, and Moses says, all right, let's debrief. He gets the whole nation together. Tell us about the land. And I'm sure Moses is thinking, it's going to be a great testimony. I want everyone to hear it. And the 10 spies speak first, and they say, it's a great land. Look at the grapes we brought back. This is amazing. But we saw a nation, we saw a land full of giants. And this is the report. Listen to this. And we were like grasshoppers in our sight. And so we were to them. This is profound. We were like grasshoppers in our sight. And so we were to them. And Moses, true to his nature, falls down on the ground, rips his clothes, starts screaming. And I'm sure Aaron looks over and goes, well, Mo's down, I'm down. And he's down on the ground. Everybody's crying, ripping their clothes. And Joshua and Caleb, they go, excuse me. We saw the giants. And we saw the land. And they shall be to us our prey. And I read an article, this has been a few years ago, a Hebrew scholar said this, and I am not a Hebrew scholar. He said that verse actually can read like this. We saw the giants, and they shall be to us our daily bread. And he related it to Matthew 6, give us today our daily bread. And he said that Joshua said, and those giants shall be to us our daily bread. Like, we will eat them for breakfast. Like, don't worry, the land is ours. We will eat these giants for breakfast. They came into the land, as you know, 40 years later. Never saw a giant. They did see the Anakim that the giants came from. They fought no giants until the days of David. The thing that scared them out of the land, they never encountered until the days of David. Only giant they ever fought was a giant, as you know, in the wilderness. One giant in the wilderness, never fought one in the promised land. They died for a fear that never happened. Died for a fear that never happened. And I want to say that I feel like we were prepared for this moment. I even feel like the government was giving us funding for our churches. And I woke up in the middle of the night, this is last week, and the Lord said, and the wealth of nations will come to you. I'm like, oh my goodness. In America, our churches are being funded by the government. The wealth of nations just got turned to us. Do you see Isaiah 60 is unfolding in the midst of darkness? The wealth of nations is coming to us. It's like, hello, wake up and smell the coffee. It doesn't get better than this. And I really feel like we're in a profound moment. And the question is, do you really know it? Do you know it? And we have people doing things like, protesting. It's like, we're going to do church anyway. We're going to gather anyway. It's like, well, you know what? You can take risks with your faith, but you can't risk other people's life with your faith without their permission. So it's like, I have faith I'm not going to catch the virus. Yes, but you're putting the other man to risk who has no faith for that. And how do we interact? Students, many of the students and many people have been writing like, should we submit to our governmental leaders? It's like, well, if you want to disciple nations, then you better learn how to be under the authority of nations. If you just want to pastor a church, then pastor on. But what we've done, like, as you know, in Reading, we had 3 years ago, we had a fire, destroyed 7% of our city. The next year we had electricity outages for weeks at a time. And then it snowed so deep, Alaskans are not going to give me any mercy here, that literally shut down our city for a month. And then we had a little baby girl die this year, 2 years old. Our worship leader and fellow worker in our school ministry. And we tried to raise her from the dead for 5 days, which never happened in the 63 years of Bethel's history. And then we had a virus. So, we've been through a lot. And I told our team, like, this is the best time in a world to be molded by God and watch the decisions that generals make in battles. Write this down because you'll need these lessons for the future.
Yeah. Hey, Kris.
Yes, sir.
This is amazing. But you got right on a subject that I know Dennis had a real question burning about, kind of the contrast between realizing that this is a Kairos moment and realizing that there's a bigger picture involved than the fray that we hear on social media, and whether it's the government taking away our rights, or whether it's the deep state, or whether it's, did this thing break out in a laboratory or not, or are our politicians making the right decisions? You have that fray, that ground level fray that goes on, but you're proposing that there's a higher level, thing that God is doing. And then you touched on, how do we then relate to the world around us in that moment? And Dennis, you want to throw your question out? I know you
Sure.
expressed that to me earlier.
Well, I know, Kris, you've been speaking about our role, and you've demonstrated it really there at Reading so well. I just want to quickly say to you, Kris, I could not exaggerate how you have impacted my life, my family's life, this church's life. You and Bill and Danny have greatly impacted us. And your example, one of your examples of how you've ministered as disciples city, is to come and serve the government officials there in Shasta County. And the stories there have just been inspiring to me. We're in this place, and Alaska probably is not that much different than Northern California, in the sense that you got pioneers, you have independent thinkers, you have people that love civil liberties and religious liberties, right? Yeah. And so they're in this place right now, and some of my friends, I would say, are like, we're gonna lose it all right now. And you talk about being on the offense. I'd just like you to speak to that issue as we respond to government when we have mandates as hurting small businesses, so forth and so on. How do we respond in this hour, demonstrating the kingdom?
Well, first of all, let me say this, where I was going with my last comments that I got off track with, is that we started bonding with our government officials deeply in the fire. And we said, how can we serve? And in that 8 months, I personally built a very close relationship with our mayor, our city manager, all of our city officials, our board of supervisors, our police chief, our fire chief, and it just came from like, let's serve, let's understand what the real decisions are, because if you don't understand the circumstance, if you're listening to the media and realizing that media is entertainment first and news second, if you're getting your information from the media, you actually don't know what you're talking about. That's all of us, and we all do it. And when you start listening, I'm sitting with the mayor, and I'm asking her, okay, what's the real issue? Why is this happening? Why is that happening? And I get in all the facts, and I'm like, okay, I get it. Maybe that's not even the decision I would make, but I get why we're making that decision. And what happened in the fire is that we began to build a partnership with our city. The us and them went away. Now, literally, the next crisis they had, I get a phone call. It's the police chief. He's like, we have a problem. You got an army. You're always telling me, if you need my army, call me. Can you come see me? So we sit down, we develop a strategy. We put, I don't remember how many, 500, 400 people. He becomes the captain, and we serve. And we serve with such excellence that we get called all the time. And so when the crisis, this virus started in our community, before we could call, they called us and said, come to the table, help us develop a strategy for our community. Now, we locked down our church before they asked us to. The reason was, in our city, is because we were in the room with the decision makers trying to decide what the best situation was, not for our little congregation of 9,000, but for our city. What's best for our city? Because we could likely keep our people pretty safe, but could we guarantee that our city wouldn't be at more risk? And realizing that other churches in our community, they're watching to see what we do. And so people are like, we're losing our religious freedom. We're losing our religious freedom? Are we not thinking like fathers and mothers what's best for our community? Like, are you thinking about what's best for your community? Or are you just thinking about, we're being persecuted? Well, I'll tell you who's being persecuted, and that's the guy with the little store, the restaurant who spent 20 years building his business, and he freaking got no business for the next 4 months, and he's got no money in the bank. Those guys are at deep risk. And so we're running around, some of our very close friends, like, religious freedom, we need to sue the government. I'm like, the government's not trying to, they're just trying to stop the virus. And if they're not doing it the right way, get it. There's a lot of different, well, my mama used to say there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. That's not a very popular saying anymore. But I would say, like, whatever we do, whatever your opinion is, as a pastor, I have to see myself as a city leader. Mm-hmm. And I have to teach my people, we are going to serve the city, and we're going to do what's best for the city. We aren't going to do what's best for us. That may be a decision different than the decision I would make, but at least we're making the decision from God's core values.
That's good. That's good. Thanks, Kris.
We should be bonding with our city right now.
Yeah.
Swearing to our civil, our religious freedom to the very people we're trying to reach, I don't even get that. I don't even get that. I know I'm gonna get such bad hate mail. I don't get it. I don't get it. Now, if they specifically are just locking churches out 8 months from now, I could get on the other side and say, whoa, wait, you're singling us out. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how you're singling anyone out. We're all shut in. And, they're saying, well, Costco gets to, I'm like, Costco, I don't want Costco to be, don't close Costco in the name of, equality. Please don't, Don't turn off electricity in the name of equality. Please don't stop picking up my garbage in the name of equality. Please keep my electricity on. Please keep my water on. I want those guys to be you know, I want those guys to be essential resources. I'm good with it.
Yeah, that's so good. Mark, Lanny, do you guys have a question you want to throw out?
You know, Kris, we live in a pretty small town here, and it's really fun to think about some of the about the fact that such an out of Weaverville. And, you know, God loves to use small things, Nazareth, Bethlehem, to change the world. And so I think, you know, I was thinking about the reset. What are some of the ingredients that came together that caused such an explosion out of such a small place that has impacted the entire world? Because we really want to be on that same track. And so as we reset, move into this next season, what are some of the things that what are your thoughts on how we should move forward with that in view?
Well, you said it yourself. You know, when Jesus was born in Nazareth, the saying was, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And I think that if you see yourself as small and if you see yourself as small and powerless, then you're right. If you see yourself as Gideon's army, you're right about that too. We were like grasshoppers in our sight, therefore we were in theirs. It matters what you think about you.
Yeah.
And I'll say that it was a joke for a long time, but we used to call Weaverville the center of the world. It was our inside joke. And it was our way of saying we may be small, but we are powerful.
Amen.
And so Bill wrote a book called The Center of the Universe. And it was our tongue-in-cheek joke for 20 years that we are literally the center of the universe. We're the center of the world. And it was our way of saying, we're going to change the world. We don't care that we live in a town of 3,000. We're going to change the world. And I think that we did. And I think it was so good to be in an isolated area because we got to learn a lot of things like you guys, I'm sure, experiencing the same. Like deliverance is a great example. We do a deliverance on Joe. Joe lives down the street. We know if the deliverance worked or not. You know, I mean, I do deliverance in Bethel now with thousands of people. I have no idea how he's doing. And so we knew like, okay, we did this ministry on this person, but it actually didn't work. And so we began to call it the Great Experiment because we actually applied the gospel and we got to see what the fruit. Jesus said, "You'll know it by the fruit." And so I think a really beautiful thing about being in a small community, and by the way, we're in a very small community still, right? We're in a community of 96,000, which is very small for California. And our church is 9,000 people in a community of 96,000. So we're still the Great Experiment from the standpoint of we know our people, and we live among our people. We're not in LA. And I feel like if you think you're great in God, you are. If you think you're not great in God, you're right about that too. And I think that you have to take risks, and you have to care, and you have to love people. It was really, when we lived in Weaverville, I was learning a lot of lessons by watching Bill. We had the largest retailer in our community, the only one that had a really huge store, at least for our town. I won't tell you his name because I want to tell you a story about him. He also had a convenience store and gas station, and they had Playboy magazine, Hustler, and all that they put in the store. They weren't in the store for years, and then they put all these magazines in the store, and just the covers were very seductive, as you probably know. And the Christians in our community, they're passing out a boycott the store and all this crazy stuff. And Bill wrote the owner that I knew well because he was a customer of mine and a very wealthy man, a really nice letter, and said, We so appreciate the way you're serving our community. Would it be possible for you to put those magazines behind the counter where the titles could be seen, but the pictures would be hidden? And the very next day he did that. He wrote Bill a very nice letter, and Bill let him know that we would never boycott you because of that. And what happened is he became a very close friend, and he actually moved in right next door to me. He was my next door neighbor. Talked to me about that very circumstance, and said that he felt honored because a man treated him with kindness and asked him a reasonable request. And what I'm getting at is that I learned from Bill how to treat people who I didn't agree with, how to still treat them with honor and with humility. And I feel like those are just keys in shepherding a city. And it's keys that the narrative we still have now.
So good.
Yeah.
Good. Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's really easy to see how the Lord is setting up a major Kairos moment. I mean, revival is getting set up, and the church is going to change. The church has to change. Do you have some insight on the kinds of things you see the church changing into?
Yeah, I think that we're in a major metamorphosis, right? A major metamorphosis. And where, in 1 month, we've become the church without walls. And if you can not complain and start dreaming, you're going to realize that there's a divine opportunity that God literally pushed us into.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that some people see a problem with every opportunity, and other people see an opportunity in every problem. And it's really important that we become the people who see this divine opportunity. I think that we need to be fathers and mothers of a city. One of my prayers has been in this crisis, Lord, can we get out of this is my flock, these are my people? Can we get out of that and can we say, this is my flock, these are my people? Many of them don't know you yet, but this is my flock, these are my people. And we are going to make very different decisions when we get our head out of our little community, the four walls of our church, and we look up and we go, oh, there's 3,000 people in my city. There's 100,000 people. There's 1 million people. There's 5 million people in my city. And it's like, I am to think about them. The challenge, I think, is to be honest, I think the challenge is the grasshopper thing. Like, if I'm in a city of 1 million, I'm like, how am I going to touch 1 million people? I'm just going to keep my head down here. It's like wearing a hoodie. I'm just going to keep my head down here and look at these 300 people you've given me. And I'm just going to think about them. I'm going to think what's best for them. And I'm like, what's best for them may not be best for y'all. And so I'm like, can we think big? Can we please stop being grasshoppers? Can we actually think like, if there's 1 million people in your city and it's your city, then God's given you wisdom and authority in that city. And the second thing I would say is, like, where the church is going, like, we have to get out of the us and them mentality. I know it's us and them from the standpoint of we don't want their sin in our lives, but when it's very difficult to be the solution to something you take no ownership of. And isn't it interesting that God gave them a promised land? That 2 Chronicles 7:14, I'll heal their land. In Isaiah 62, it says, and to your land shall you be married. Interesting, I wrote a book called Dust in the Wind, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. And I had this revelation that your destiny is in your destiny is in your people. Like, you actually don't have a purpose without a people. And I finished the book, it got all done, and a year later, I had an encounter, and the Lord said, you missed the main point of destiny. I said, what is that? He said, your destiny is not just in your people, it's in your land. And the Lord said, you'll never change a land you don't own. And then he showed me Isaiah 6:2, and to your land will you be married. To your land will you be married. That principle changed my life. I'm like, this isn't a land, this is my land. This is my land. I care about this land. I care about these people. And I feel like the church, I feel like we just need to like look up, take the hoodie off, and start thinking like citizens of a land, and like instead of like citizens of a building that's 10,000 square feet. Like, let's think big. And the other thing I'll say is that, again, I said it in passing. Most people are getting their information about the decisions our government makes from the media. First of all, that is the worst place to get information about what's really happening. There are lots of reasons why decision makers don't tell the news, don't give the news all the information. Lots of them. All of us that are leaders in this room right now, right? I mean, there are things that happen behind the scenes that if you articulated them, there would be massive different outcomes with different people. You're not trying to hide anything. You're just trying to make good decisions and keep your people safe. I hear Christians making statements about things I know about because some of those guys are my friends. And I'm like, I can't even tell you what the truth is because confidentiality is the key to having influence in government. If you can't keep confidentiality, you're not going to be invited in the inner circle. At the same time, I'm like, I just want to say to my friends, like, you don't actually know what's going on. So, and I don't know what's going on in several circles, but I know that I don't know, if that makes sense. So I'm like, we need to think like kings. Like, this is where we're going. We're making disciples of all nations. We have to start thinking like kings. He's King of kings, and we are some of the kings he's king of. So these are just things that we have to just, it's a whole mindset shift when we understand that we are not grasshoppers. We are daughters and sons of God himself. That's a powerful statement. And then also, how many mistakes do we make in our leadership? Oh my goodness. I could write 5 books on here's the mistakes we made. So, political leaders, business leaders, I mean, are they making mistakes? Of course they are. I'll say one more thing that you didn't actually ask. I don't know if we're over time, Pat, please.
Oh, we're okay. We're good.
Every time there's a crisis, there are conspiracy theories. And people writing me every day now, several times a day. What do you think about the China virus was da-da-da-da-da? And what do you think about it's like, and this conspiracy and this whole thing. And some of my friends are very much deep into it. And I'm like, the devil has a plan to destroy the earth. And he needs to keep it a secret because he has no authority. God has a plan to take over the earth. He published it in the most popular book in the history of the world. And then he said, try and stop me. So is there conspiracies? Absolutely, there are conspiracies. Absolutely. The mafia has conspiracy. The Russians have it. The Americans, everybody has conspiracy. Everybody's trying to take over the world. But there's only one person who has veto power of all of them. And when the pharaohs of the world get power and they want to push that button and blow up the world, God goes, oh, no, not on my watch. And he pushes their tower over. He sends a Moses in. He sends an Esther in. And I mean, you got to know that by now somebody would have blown up the world had it not be for God's veto power. So, running around being afraid of the next conspiracy, that's been going on since I was a kid. And so people write all the time. My spiritual father wrote me yesterday, and he's like, have you heard about the 5G? I'm like, come on, man. The 5G conspiracies, what caused the viruses, and I'm like, there was no 5G in the Spanish flu. I mean, please, how about the Black Plague? I mean, stop.
Yeah.
And yeah, the devil has a strategy. The virus is kill, steal, destroy. But the Lord has a strategy. And so I don't really have time for the conspiracy theories. I haven't even got the entire battle plan that we're in down.
Yeah. Wow. Hey, we're approaching the time we have to wrap this up. And if you're out there in Facebook land and kind of wondering what this is about, it's just a platform where leaders who love Alaska, care about Alaska, can come together and share. We have our special guest tonight is Kris Vallotton from Bethel Church in Redding, along with Dennis Hotchkiss and his son Tanner from Northgate Alaska Church, and Mark Edens, Lanny Simpson, and Sean and Jenny Grimes from Homer from Regent Life Church there. And we're just having a great discussion. If this will be, you'll be able to go back and watch the beginning of it. I understand from a few texts that I received during this meeting that the first part of the meeting might have been really glitchy and hard to understand. I apologize for that. If we had a technical glitch, it wasn't anything we could necessarily see. So hopefully, if you do go back and replay it, it'll actually play properly. You can catch up on what you missed. We've had a chance to hear from Kris, ask a few questions, and we're just getting down to the last few minutes of our broadcast. So I've got a million questions that just pop in my mind as you're talking, Kris. I'd love to spend another 3 weeks talking like this with you, just to hear your perspective. I love your heart. I just love how you go after what God is saying, and you help us with perspective. And I want to say really quickly that if you enjoy Kris's perspective and the things you've heard, he has a website, krisvallotton.com, where he posts podcasts, articles, all kinds of content there. And you can literally go there and just hear a lot of what he shared here in various forms there. Also, Kris, tell us if there were a couple things that you feel like would be helpful for all the folks that are listening that are in Alaska that might want to connect with Bethel and with you in a better way. Just give us a couple of ways that you would recommend, Bethel TV, or just an example or two that you feel like would be a good resource.
We have Bethel TV that's free. There's a subscription that you can pay for too and get other stuff, but it's free. Every week there's stuff on there, shows on there. We're on YouTube everywhere. I just wrote a book called Spirit Wars. I felt like it was really relevant to the season, so we gave it away for free. That's still going on. And then I did 8 lessons out of it. Again, all for free. That's still going on. You can download the PDF for free all over the world, by the way, in every nation. So it's only in English, unfortunately, but that's there. And I just really want to thank you, Pat, and Dennis and team, all you guys. Thank you so much for having me on, and I hope my ranting didn't cost you your friend. No,
Good stuff.
No way. It's just such an honor, Kris. You're a voice here in Alaska, and I know you've made a bunch of trips up here in the past. I hope we can work that out for you to come back and make that a future thing not too long from now, we hope. And we value you. We love you. It's late in the day for you. I'm sure you've had a long day, and you took the time to just spend some moments with us. And hopefully it's been a blessing to the people that are on the live stream, the various places that people can watch it. And we'll re-watch it over the next few days. But Kris, would you wrap this up just by praying for Alaska? Would you just?
I would. Lord, I thank you for Alaska. I thank you, God, that that's a pioneering spirit there, that there's an apostolic call on Alaska, that out of Alaska, you're changing the world. You're sending your best and brightest out of that place. You're training and equipping and employing them out of there into the world. And Lord, I pray for a covering to be over Alaska. I pray for this virus to end. I pray for there to be the lockdown to end there, all over the world, but Alaska. And Lord, I pray that that apostolic mantle would grow and that Alaska would become the crown jewel of America, that out of Alaska would come a love and power movement that would really radically alter the course of history, both American history and the world. And Lord, I pray that as Alaska has so much oil and natural resources under the cover of ice and snow, that Lord, that you would unearth the greatness that you've put in that state, that you would unearth the anointing oil for the healing of nations, and that you would bless the world through Alaska. And as we said at the opening moments of this podcast, this webcast, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Others ask, can anything great come out of Alaska? And we say yes and amen to that.
Amen.
That greatness would flow out of Alaska, and that you would supply the anointing oil for the world out of Alaska.
Amen.
And we bless them. We bless every person who got to listen. Lord, I pray that if I said anything that was offensive, that you would salt it with grace, and that you would let people know my heart. And we bless this time in Jesus' name.
Yeah. Amen.
Sorry.
Amen.
Dennis, any final word to Kris?
I just want to say, Kris, you're right on. I love listening to you, and I love how you and Bill model what you preach. And you're shaping history all over the place, and you're shaping history up here. So thank you
very much. God bless you guys.
Mark and Lanny?
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kris, and thank you to all of you who tuned in tonight. We'll do more of these in the future. And if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, that's some humility there. I will hear from heaven and I will heal their land. I just want to end the broadcast tonight by asking you a question. What does a healed land look like?
Good.
Just ponder that. What does a healed land look like? Let's get a vision for that and go after that. Amen.
Amen.
That's awesome. All right. Love you guys. Bless you. Thank you. Overnight or over and out. Amen.
Thanks, Pat. See you, Pat.
Thanks, Pat.